Welcome back to a brand new playoff live reaction. John is joining me today. Andrew did a 5-hour Bleacher Report stream for the draft, so he's had a long day, won't be on. Dells is busy, and so is Riv. They won't be on. So John is joining me to talk about the playoffs and what we've seen in Game 3. I feel like we have to start with the biggest storyline that happened, and that's the Timberwolves beating the Phoenix Suns 126 to 109. The Wolves take a 3-0 series lead. We're going to talk about the Suns individually. Before we get to that, I want to praise the Wolves. I want to praise the Wolves because they deserve that much recognition. Before Game 3 started, I was looking at some stats, and man, have they been elite defensively, which has been evident. 98.9 defensive rating. Their offensive rating has been 118 essentially. After Game 3, I could imagine those numbers look even better. The Timberwolves defense is so special, man. It's so special. And I want to start by saying I picked the Suns to win this series. I thought it'd be more competitive. I thought it was a bad matchup for the Wolves based off what I've seen in the regular season. But by no means does that mean that I'm not happy for the Wolves. From this series, I think Anthony Edwards took the mantle of being the best two guard in the NBA. Anthony Edwards is the best shooting guard in the NBA. Jaden McDaniels had an overpaid label on him all season long. In the first round, he shut down Hall of Fame talent. He had an amazing game too. I love the redemption arc from Rudy Gobert, where all of his career he's been surrounded by terrible perimeter defenders, and it's never been able to encapsulate how important he truly is. And in this series, you see that when you surround him with that type of talent and you maximize what he brings to the table defensively, it looks suffocating like this. The storyline is going to be the Suns. The storyline should be how elite and special this Timberwolves defense is. It's one of the best defenses that we've seen in recent memory.
You're 100% right. I mean, in the regular season, they had the best defensive rating and the least amount of points per game. And the biggest thing is in the playoffs, many people will look at this series coming in, they say, you've got Kevin Durant, you've got D-Book, and you've got Bradley Beal. And it took those three players 3 games to hit 100 points. And even today, where they hit 109 points, is because of, in the fourth quarter, them scoring 36. And the biggest thing for me, when they made the Rudy Gobert trade, many people thought, how is it going to work offensively? And basically, what Minnesota banked on is the fact that Rudy Gobert will have everything he never had in Utah. And it's one thing to have Jaden McDaniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Anthony Edwards, and Kyle Anderson when he does play on the perimeter defensively. It's another thing to have guys like Nickeil and Mike Conley who are never missing a rotation. And the biggest difference is where Rudy Gobert and Utah would kind of have to pick between giving up an open corner three and open dunk. Minnesota's playing a Suns team that's not moving the ball well enough to be able to get them on the back end when Rudy's out the paint. So when he's out the paint, you've got everybody scrambling and making the right rotations. So this Minnesota defense statistically is one of the best of all time because of the fact that right now we're in the highest stage of scoring. And in that time period, they're shutting down the best offensive stars in the game. And quite frankly, when you look at Devin Booker, the series that he's having right now is the worst of his entire career. And when you put that into consideration, I don't think it's hyperbole. The Timberwolves are proving why this is one of the best defenses in NBA history.
Anthony Edwards in 3 playoff series. Tonight, he had 36 points. In 3 playoff series, he has 7 30-point games, which ties Kevin Garnett for the most in Timberwolves franchise history, the most 30-point games. It starts with him. He's the leader of this group. He is so darn special, John. Anthony Edwards is so damn special. Everybody knows it. Everybody realizes it. Everybody knows he's going to be the face of the league. But Timberwolves fans very early on gravitated towards Anthony Edwards because of one thing, how well-spoken he is and how great of a teammate he is. When you think about a player that has the talent that you want to build a team around, but also has the personality that you want to build a team around, Anthony Edwards is at the top of the list. Not only is he a one-of-one talent, But very early on, since he was a rookie, he always spoke highly of his teammates. Even this year, you look at press conferences, he's saying Cat is the best player on the team. The most viral clip that is now being vindicated is a reporter saying they got Kevin Durant, and he said we got Jaden McDaniels. He never misses a beat with propping up his teammates, whether that's Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And for this kid to do that at 22 years old, to be this mature, it's made the world of differences for the Timberwolves. For him to be as competitive as he is on the defensive side of the basketball, for him to want to be one of the best defenders in the world, for him to want to be the best player in the NBA. He's a playoff riser, and he's single-handedly changed the Timberwolves trajectory as a franchise. And that's why the Timberwolves made that Rudy Gobert trade in the first place, because they saw how special he was.
They saw the intangibles they had to lead a team. I mean, at the end of the day, in game 2, it doesn't play too well, goes 3 of 12 from the field. And then today has 16 points in the fourth quarter to kind of seal it. In a matchup where the Suns, they're trying to make it that single-digit possession game, but Minnesota is able to finally put things away, where in past years, 2022 versus the Memphis Grizzlies, they're blowing 2 separate 15-plus point leads. And that's where Chris Finch gives players more autonomy, and he allows Anthony Edwards to run this offense and control the game, because, like you highlighted, Ant's in year 4 now, but he's not turning 23 until August. So with how much that he's seen from the bad of his rookie year to probably now having to grow up much more soon than many other players in his draft class, it is a testament to the fact that he has the physical makeup to be a top 10 player. But at the end of the day, Anthony Edwards has the mental makeup. And that's why in a series where, again, you're playing a Suns team that, in terms of star power, has a lot more than you, right? And Rudy Gobert has been the most important player in the series, but Ant has been the best offensive driver. And quite frankly, that's highlighting that makeup that he has to go ahead of KD and talk that game as well while he's out playing him. That's a rare thing to find.
The competitiveness from these young players, Anthony Edwards going at KD, Jaden going at D-Book. He had 5 turnovers today. Anthony Edwards did. But I came away very impressed with his improvements as a passer. And he's improved from game to game this season. In games this year, he would struggle. He would get tunnel vision sometimes. And since the playoffs have started, I feel like whenever the Suns would send two to the ball or collapse, he's made some excellent passes. The Suns could not stop the ball in this series at all. Game 3, it didn't matter. It didn't matter if they were in the zone or if they played man. They don't have the perimeter defenders to stop Minnesota from driving the basketball. Yeah. And once Minnesota is able to get their defense into rotation, there's wide open 3-point shooters everywhere. And who benefits from that? Naz Reid, who just won 6 Man of the Year. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who I feel as if Nickeil, every time I'm looking, he's making a 3. He's barely missed this series. He's been amazing. Yeah. And his defense too. This was just a mismatch all around in the Timberwolves' favor. 100% I got this series wrong. I'm not denying it, but I love this for Minnesota because they're showing just how great of a team they are, just how high of a ceiling they truly have. And hey, sometimes it takes a series like this to truly open someone like my eyes to say, you know what, maybe even somebody that was as high as them as me all season long, I even underestimated how great this defense translated to the playoffs and that they had a different gear they could get to offensively when they got here as well.
And I want to wrap things up with their bench, because in past years, we've seen not just Minnesota, but with many younger teams, they get to the playoffs, and what worked for them in the regular season does not translate to the postseason environment. A lot of their guys are just not prepared for that moment. Last year, they didn't have Naz Reid in that Nugget series. They also didn't have Jaden McDaniels. This year, they have their 7-man rotation. Monte Morris is your 8th, Kyle Anderson's your 9th, but they're finally at a point where their 7 guys has enough chemistry and just continuity together on both sides of the floor where it is really playoff hardened, even though they've only had 2 playoff runs to them. And I think when you have Knox coming off the bench, he was a plus 25 today. Defensively, he does not miss a single rotation. Offensively, he's going to hit every single wide open 3, and those come around like 3 or 4 times in big moments. And then he's also going to create off the dribble too when you need him to. Having that, and then Naz Reid, who maybe you didn't have him when 6 Man of the Year. My pick was Malik Monk. but Nas is able to also make that difference where their bench relative to the Suns bench is probably the most widest discrepancy this postseason, because the Suns don't have that chemistry as a group altogether when those guys do come with their, like the Suns this year, they've cycled through three different benches based off of last year. So they don't have that continuity when they're trying to machinate lineups with their bench and their starting five.
The Suns being down 0-3, the series is over. They might win a
Really?
game.
I know that.
They might win two.
Thank you for
I
reminding
doubt
me.
it. I doubt it. They might get swept. The Suns, it's over for them.
Get swept. It's over.
And you know, I want to make this analogy. You ever been on a road trip? And the best road trips are always when everybody knows what they're doing. You know who's driving. You know who's playing the music. You know who's in the back being the personality. I don't think the Suns have figured that out. They don't know that dynamic. They haven't figured that out. Kevin Durant, he can't be somebody that's driving during the road trip, and he can't be in the passenger seat playing music on his aux either, because everybody thinks it's terrible. He lacks leadership skills. Ever since that Bucks series in 2021, he's been so inconsistent in the playoffs. He's older, so he gets some leeway there, but it is a terrible look that everywhere he's went, that he's handpicked, that hasn't been a juggernaut like the Warriors, it has been a disaster. It's ended in disaster. I think it showcases his lack of leadership, and originally why he didn't stay in OKC to face Golden State, because he didn't believe in himself to the point that he can get his team over the hump. In a lot of people's eyes, that's a cowardice way to approach the game when a team just beat you when you were up 3-1. And I can't even defend it. How he's played in the playoffs, it's been indefensible. He has lost his first step. I think his first step is virtually cooked. He's a mid-range jump shooter. He's going to live on tough shots. And unless he goes to a team at this stage in his career that has stacked the deck, like OKC, and he is with Chet, J-Dub, and SGA, he's not going to make a world's difference. He's going to score his points individually. It's going to look good, but in the playoffs, he's not going to make much of a difference unless he's in the back seat on the coattails of someone driving the car. With Devin Booker, I don't think he's a driver either. I don't think he's a number one. He might be a high-end number two, but he's too cocky. It's not a bad thing at times. You look at the clip early in the year where he says he doesn't know how anybody's going to guard this team, and the Timberwolves just shut them down. Devin Booker has overrated himself. Devin Booker has made himself out to be something that he's not. This series has been the most disappointing of them all. And the reason why he's not a driver is because this entire series, has he not been the least aggressive of Bradley Beal and Kevin Durant?
He has been. And that's the biggest difference to me, because in past years with Monty Williams and Chris Paul, the Suns are able to create designs and sets to where offensively they would have an advantage that wasn't based out of isolation. This year, their offense is very simple. It's Drew Eubanks, Yusuf Nurkic, or Kevin Durant's going to set a ball screen. Bradley Beal is going to come off another screen. And then it's just going to be a Devin Booker isolation. And the playoffs, not only is that very predictable, but more importantly, it's very fatiguing. So in D-Book, after 3.5 quarters of basically going back and forth playing out of isolation, then has to deal with another possession of Nickeil Alexander-Walker riding behind him, and then Jaden McDaniel switching onto him. He's going to get worn down. And so when you compare it to last postseason, he's not the same player. He's nowhere near as assertive. He's not quite as explosive. And he's not necessarily getting the same lift on his mid-range shots either. I want to give some credit to Bradley Beal. I felt like he's been fine. Today, he got up 11 threes, which is exactly what they need without Grayson Allen. But the issue with the Suns team is that they simply, as you highlighted, don't have enough variety or flavor offensively to where Kevin Durant and Devin Booker are going to be maximized. Each of these two guys' skill sets right now are basically being diminished because of the fact this team is so far below the sum of their parts. The Suns are, to me, the biggest flop of the big three. Devin Booker's in the middle of his prime. Bradley Beal has turned 30. Kevin Durant, at 35 years old, just had one of his best regular seasons, continuing to play at an All-NBA level. So when you look at the trio that they've had, the talent makes it so it can be a championship team. But ultimately, it's just between Frank Vogel's limitations as a head coach, which we knew were coming into this year going to be a problem with this team, and then their lack of continuity and chemistry, I just, I look back and I think I've learned a lot after being a believer of this team. They've taught me a lot about what to not buy into and what to look for specifically with teams that we've seen in recent years maximize the sum of their parts.
I love that you said that, because if this Suns team has taught us one thing, it's taught us you don't need to stack the deck with names on paper. You need to build a cohesive roster that makes sense.
Mhm.
And the Suns roster doesn't make sense. Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, none of their games complement each other. And because of that, they have found themselves stuck in this situation. The role players aren't the best. I'd say they have one of the worst benches in the league. There's no sugarcoating that. They can't stop anybody on the ball. They have no perimeter defenders at the wing. They don't have size, to the point that I'm going, Frank Vogel has to play Bol because he's the only guy that gives them length on the floor.
Playoff run.
They don't have any size. It's Eric Gordon, Royce O'Neal, Bradley Beal, all 6'3", 6'4", with Devin Booker 6'5", trying to guard explosive players off the dribble. Mm-hmm. It's just not going to work. You need to build a roster that makes sense, and the Suns don't make sense. I understand what you're saying because they taught me a lesson as well, and I think maybe I should have learned better from
lost you for a second.
The 2022 Nets is that KD and Kyrie, they weren't enough to beat the Celtics. I picked them in that series because of the star power. I didn't learn from that because I picked the Suns in this series too. I didn't learn from my lesson. Bradley Beal, I thought he was fine, but he's somebody that's a weird fit.
Yeah,
I think if you're a Suns fan, you have to hate what Matt Ishbia has done to your team. This is an example of a compulsive owner who bought a team because he had a lot of money and he ruined it quickly. He ruined a team that took years to build from a foundation standpoint through the draft with Devin Booker, Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, DeAndre Ayton,
Chris Paul.
Chris Paul. Made a trade for Kevin Durant, traded Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson, all of their future picks, for a move that didn't work. Then traded Chris Paul for a contract in Bradley Beal's that is going to be very hard to move on from. And this has blew up so bad in the Suns' face that the best avenue of action might be to go into a rebuild. There are some people still optimistic that they can trade Bradley Beal and they can trade Nurkic and still get pieces to complement Devin Booker or KD, or maybe trade KD and build around Booker. But I just don't see an avenue for the Suns. I don't see a scenario where it doesn't end with them completely blowing the team up and just trying to get assets to stay above water for the future.
Notice how right there you said the two biggest assets this team has is Bradley Beal with a $50 million player, a $50 million contract and no trade clause, and Yusuf Nurkic. Yeah, it's over. I mean, coming into this year, I had the Suns as a contender throughout the regular season. I gave this team leeway, but ultimately what happened is Matt Ishbia did what many young owners are going to do. They're going to try to maximize the team, which has a playoff window. Devin Booker is 27 years old. He's been in the NBA for 10 years now. It feels like he's been in the league even longer because he was drafted back in 2014. And if I am Matt Ishbia, I'll be 100% straight. I'll be straightforward with you. I still think I would do what the Suns did choose to do, which is acquiring Kevin Durant and then making the move for Bradley Beal, because the question is, what better option did you have? If you continued with DeAndre Ayton, Chris Paul, 37, 38 years old, as we saw this year, now coming off the bench, not being able to play over 25 minutes, they were not going to go any further. And back in 2021, we didn't really realize that that was their biggest and best opportunity to win a championship. So when you flash forward 3 years later, it is just like the Los Angeles Clippers. NBA teams have to take big gambles to win a championship, but oftentimes, only one team's going to win at the end of the day. You're probably not going to get to win the title. And there's a lot of luck and a lot of it is luck. A lot of it is just making the right moves. One of the biggest mistakes to me was hiring Frank Vogel because of the fact you needed a more innovative and creative offensive mind. And defensively, you highlighted it. This team cannot stop anything off the dribble. And that's not necessarily a Vogel issue, but if he's not going to be an offensive guru, and the defense already has its limitations. We'd like a coach who just brings more variety, more flavor, as I was saying before. So I don't even think the Suns' biggest issue necessarily was making the trades. It was the impulsive nature of moving off Monty Williams. Was he one of the worst coaches this year in Detroit? Most likely. Was he done in Phoenix? Maybe. But was he the best coach then moving forward? I think probably. When they fired him, I said that would probably be the wrong decision because the Suns made too many changes. And you look at this roster, Joel. Can you name me a single Suns player beyond Devin Booker that they've drafted? Because there isn't one. You look at their bench. Not one player off their bench was here back in 2021 when they went to the NBA Finals. So when you compare this Suns team to just last year, the amount of change that they've made, I don't think it's a star talent issue. It's really the little moves that they've made around the edges, which have all been so poor.
But here's the thing, though.
There is one exception, and that was acquiring Grayson Allen in the Yusuf Nurkic, DeAndre Ayton trade.
No.
That was one move they did get right.
But this is the thing, and I don't totally disagree with you. I understand where you're coming from. But in saying that, Mikal Bridges, when he went to Brooklyn and got an expanded role, he played really well. This year, the efficiency went down, but I mean, he still showed you that he at least had the potential to be like an 18 to 21 point per game scorer behind a primary star and play elite level defense. Cam Johnson, a great role player. DeAndre Ayton was the wild card. I know nobody's watching Blazers games, but towards the end of the season, he looked really great with Chauncey Billups. So maybe it was like before you try to blow up this team completely, you try to get a new coach in there to bring the best out of your current players. And with the draft picks you have, you draft players in the draft and you scout well to add talent to your team. You know, the Indiana Pacers right now, Ben Shepherd, who they drafted in the late first round, is playing playoff minutes for them and is being very impactful. You don't need to draft at the lottery all the time to get a really good player. So if they would have kept their core together, Chris Paul was aging, we know that. If they would have kept their core together and then just drafted well, scouted well, maybe made a trade here and there to get better there, I still see a scenario where the Suns are at least like one of the more competitive teams in the West, and they aren't getting embarrassed like this.
So here's my thing. If you're the Denver Nuggets, you can apply that philosophy because you have Nikola Jokic. You don't need the supporting star talent, and they have the supporting star talent. But the Suns, Devin Booker's not on that level. So they needed more star power. And the balance of it, you could say they tipped the pendulum too far. But if they were to approach things like the Pacers right now, they're going to have in the same exact spot as the Pacers, probably a second round, first round exit. Second round might be better than what the Suns are doing this year, but just I think the 30,000-foot view is that the Suns, they need to make those big moves because Mikal as number 2 sounds really good, but in this Western Conference, you and I both know it's not going to beat Denver. And I don't even think that's going to beat Los Angeles, who the Nuggets are about a sweep. So
no, but look at the Knicks, though. Look at the Knicks. They don't have a lottery pick on their team.
No, not right now. But
that's been trades and that's been drafting.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the Pelicans. I know that Zion and Brandon Ingram, that's a great duo, but I think Zion as your best player versus Devin Booker is like kind of similar. Should they just go out and just get a star right away, or should they just let it play out?
But the Knicks are different because of the fact they had so many resources. They built the best supporting cast we've seen in probably the last 5 years. And even with the best supporting cast in the last 4 or 5 years, we still know they're a half tier below Boston, and they're probably not going to get to the finals this year. They'll be good enough to get to the second round, and I think better than not, the conference finals. But if you're the Suns, if you get to the conference finals and you lose in 6 games, that's a disappointment. Because of the fact they'd already been to the finals, anything short of that is going to be a letdown. So I think in Phoenix's case, it's very rare. It's a lot like Los Angeles. It's a championship or bust mentality. And so that's the way you got to approach your team building.
I think you have a point. I think you do. I just feel as if there comes a point in time where it's about attachment to the team that you have. The best team that I watched was the Knicks in 2012 with Carmelo Anthony, and then Knicks now. As a Knicks fan, these are the best teams I've watched. I don't think we're going to win a championship, but I think it's some really good basketball.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of Suns fans, they look at their team and they say, man, we really loved Mikal Bridges. We really loved Cam Johnson. I was at the Suns game in Phoenix when the Nets came to play them, and they had a homecoming for Mikal and Cam Johnson. And those fans teared up with them being back. They teared up. It was that emotional.
Mm-hmm.
I think that sometimes we get too caught up in winning a championship or not winning a championship that we kind of forget the attachment that these fans have to these players and this team. And it's like, would you rather have kept that core together and just seen what had happened, just wrote it out because they're all fairly young. Mm-hmm. So you would have had time to build something rather than go all in for a year and a half, see it all blow up in your face, and now you're left with nothing. Even if it is for a high gamble, you risked it all to get to the mountaintop. I think sometimes it's better to just maintain what you have and build on that in the foundation and just keep that connection with the fans, because Suns fans are always going to remember that group of their team and say, man, that was one of the funnest times I've had watching basketball as a Suns fan.
You're right about that, because championships seem to be everything to us, but you can have a successful era without winning a championship. And with Phoenix, we've seen this multiple times. In the 7 seconds or less days, they had 2 60-win seasons. We're not saying the 7 seconds or less Suns were a disappointment or a failure. We're saying that was one of the best moments in the franchise history. Is a successful run. And if you're going to say, well, they didn't win a championship because they didn't get through San Antonio, Dallas, and all of the other contenders in the Western Conference, then you're kind of being a little... It's hard to have that conversation because of the fact the Suns, a lot like the 7 seconds or less Suns who trade for Shaquille O'Neal and got their roster. They move off of Josh Richardson. They move off of Joe Johnson, and they trade Quentin Richardson. They never let that team fully play out either. And they never were able to build off their first year together the same exact way the Suns weren't able to build off their first year together. So you are right about that.
The Mavericks dominated the Clippers in Game 3. I'm very excited to talk about this because Luka shot under 30% this game, John, and the Mavericks were able to win by double digits. They won 101-90. I prayed for times like this, John, where Luka, he doesn't have to carry the load and his team can win. This is a great team, man. And next series it's gonna be Mavericks and OKC next series. I think Kawhi is not healthy. He's not healthy. He's still moving gingerly. He's not healthy. But I also don't want to discount what the Mavericks are doing because they are an elite defensive team. They are so great. Their rotations are sound. Maxi Kleba is the perfect Swiss Army knife. You can play him in small ball lineups. He's versatile enough to play the forward spot, keep up on the perimeter. Derrick Jones Jr. has revived his career with Dallas. Elite defender, elite effort on the glass, chasing every single loose ball, slashing to the basket. And PJ Washington, what he means to this team as an enforcer. Every team needs one of those guys that if you just lay a finger on my best player on the team, I'm going to confront you about it. And PJ and Russell Westbrook both got ejected because PJ did just that. But that's the type of player you need. And the fact that he's been able to come to this team so quickly and already have that camaraderie with his teammates, these guys love playing with each other. Kyrie Irving, in the first half, a little silent. In the second half, he had 17 points. Kyrie Irving deserves his flowers. When he left Brooklyn, I was very critical of him. There's no doubt. But in Dallas, not only from a play style perspective, is this the best he looks for a while now, playing next to somebody else, but from a leadership perspective, this is someone that the entire Mavericks locker room is gravitating towards. And now with Kyrie Irving, because we never got to see Jalen Brunson at his best with Luka. When Luka's on the bench, the lineups stay afloat. They go on runs. Kyrie is able to lift up an offense. He's able to hit tough shots when Luka doesn't have it. And that's what he did in the third quarter and in the fourth quarter. This team is just so great. They forced the Clippers into 19 turnovers. And Mavs fans got to be really excited that this is the first time they've had this legit of a roster next to Luka The center play with Lively and Gafford, they were so impactful. This was an excellent game 3 win, and they only shot 27% from 3. They haven't even had an offensive explosion yet this series.
I love that you highlighted that, because that was the first thing I was going to mention. With the Mavericks in past years, they've made it to the conference finals with very flawed teams. And all of those teams had a limitation. If they shot below 30, let's say 34% from three-point land, they're most likely going to lose. This Maverick team has been able to forge an identity, which is more than just that. They're still a more predictable offense, but they're allowed to be predictable because of the diversity that Kyrie brings as your number 2. And again, you highlight it. Guys like PJ Washington can go just 0 of 4 today. Luka goes 3 of 14. And they're still winning because their defense is holding this Clippers offense to just 90 points. And the biggest difference to me is that front court play. Derek Lively off the bench in just 15 minutes, 6 of 8. He's finishing everything at the rim. And for a rookie, he's just 20 years old, to play this well, positive minutes, off the bench, run the starting lineup. That's something you hardly see, especially on a team where you've got Daniel Gafford coming in the middle of the year, bringing a lot of rim protection. I still want to see more from him on the glass. But the Mavericks just have a lot more physicality. And that's the biggest difference between last year we missed the playoffs, and you don't have that enforcer. JaVale McGee was signed to be that, never worked. You bring in PJ Washington, Gafford, Derek Jones. Those guys had a length, athleticism, and just the motor, which every single contender is going to need around a star. And they remind me a bit of those LeBron and Kyrie-led teams where you've got your 2 lead creators, and around them, you're going to have your flamethrower. For them, Tim Hardaway Jr. hasn't been fully healthy this year. He's like this team's J.R. Smith. But then the guys like Tristan Thompson and your wing defenders, those are the guys that are supposed to round out your lineup. And I think this is the first time in Luka's career where you could say, this is an average supporting cast. And that can be enough for him to go back to the conference finals. And again, and this series where Kawhi comes back and his knee's not right after game 3, we can see the series end 5 if Kawhi is not going to be able to really play over 25 minutes without having that knee kind of flare up again.
And how about Josh Green?
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't mention 25 minutes leading the bench. Played pretty darn well when Jason Kidd decides to play him, which doesn't always make sense to me why he doesn't.
He has a rocket attached to his ass, man. He plays so fast with so much effort. Luka in these first 3 games, game 1, 11 for 26, 4 for 12 from 3. Game 2, 11 for 26, 5 for 14 from 3. Game 3, 7 for 25, 3 for 13 from 3. We aren't even getting MVP Luka performances. And these are still great numbers, by the way, because it's 32, 6 and 9 and 22, 10 and 9. But we aren't even getting MVP Luka yet. Mm-hmm. What if he turns it on next game and the Mavericks go up 3-1? Oh yeah. It's over. The Clippers team is flawed to me. Russell Westbrook, before the series started, was my X factor. Mm-hmm. Because the Mavericks don't have a player off the bench like him. And I thought he's played some good defense on Luka. The problem with Westbrook is that he can either make or break you. Tonight, he broke them. He had 1 point. He couldn't make an open 3. He's being left wide open, which messes up the spacing. Mm-hmm. I never trust Paul George in the playoffs. I never do. And he's played, I think, pretty terribly to start the series. James Harden has been the most consistent player. And Zubac, the first 2 games for Harden, game 1 and game 3, he's played well. Game 2, he didn't shoot well. And then Zubac has been awesome.
Been it.
Yeah. But this team, this is my worry with them, is I don't trust Harden and Paul George. That's number 1. If Kawhi Leonard does not have a Superman series, I don't think the Clippers can beat the Mavericks. And we're seeing the knee start to flare up. And I made this point on the podcast a while ago that we never know when a star player is going to have a bad playoff series. Nobody saw Kevin Durant getting swept by the Celtics in 2022. Nobody saw him playing that poorly. With Kawhi, to this point, he's been an excellent playoff performer. So we always just kind of chalk it up and say he's great. But hey, wait a minute. After all these injuries, with him getting older, with him having the biggest load that he's had in a while this season, what if he doesn't play like Shaq-like efficiency again in the playoffs? Yeah. How do the Clippers look and how do the Clippers win?
It's perfectly stated because last year was a 2-game sample of him putting Shaq numbers up. And if that's all his body could take before it broke down physically, then the question was, can he even get through a full playoff series? And I do think it's unfortunate because Kawhi, if he were fully healthy, we're talking about a 7-game series. And that's what I had coming in. The Clippers winning, sorry, the Clippers losing in 7 games and the Mavericks getting it. But the biggest issue for the Clippers is just going to be that they've always tried to basically build around that fact. Knowing Kawhi is going to be out, we're going to add in James Harden and Norman Powell, and we're going to have an influx of shot creation to basically prepare for when Kawhi is out of the lineup. And because of that, you look at their roster, there's not many well-rounded role players. It's a lot of shot creation, but beyond those lead creators, I'm talking about Harden, Powell, and Paul George, there's not many guys like Nick Batum or Robert Covington who back 2 or 3 years ago were what were making this a true contender because they're one of the slowest teams in the league. And at their age, not only do they move very slow, but defensively, they can't cover as much ground. And so when you're playing these younger teams like the Timberwolves and the Mavs that have a lot more juice and they have a lot more energy and they're getting out in transition, the Clippers can't quite keep up. And that is a very simple thing, but that's a trend with older teams. The Clippers don't have versatility. They play the same exact way as the Phoenix Suns. And today's Western Conference, where teams like the Thunder and the Timberwolves are shocking everybody without having 3 All-Stars or 3 stars that are proven, it's not because of the star talent. It's really just because of how well-rounded a group they have. The Clippers, to me, are a one-dimensional team.
That's well said. The last game we're going to talk about before we get off, the Indiana Pacers beat the Bucks 121-118. Game winner from Tyrese Haliburton, triple double. Don't look at the shooting splits though. Don't look at the shooting splits, John.
Look at the
I don't want you to do that.
Consider the shooting splits.
1 for 12 from 3, and he had some amazing looks. But I can't complain because I want him to take those. I made a video about Tyrese in game 2, 12 points, 12 assists, and how we're overly criticizing him for playing his role. If 2 is on the ball, if they're going to hard double at him every time a screen comes, then the right basketball play is to pass the ball and to open up the floor for his teammates. The Bucks did a much better job at guarding Pascal Siakam this game, which freed up Tyrese to take more shots, and that's why he was more aggressive. The Bucks got a great game from Chris Middleton, 40+ points. I mean, the ending to the game. Middleton made a shot to tie the game, to go into OT. In OT, made a shot down 3 to tie the game up. Yeah, a bank shot. And to go into OT, he was doubled. He made it over 2 people fading away. It was so special. Chris Middleton, he's so awesome to watch. Damian Lillard went out with a knee injury early, came back in the game. He was up and down in the second half. This was the first second half of the series that he played somewhat well. The Pacers role players, I think, are the difference maker in this series so far. The Bucks can't guard them, and a big reason for that is because of how well the Pacers move the ball. They just swing the ball so effortlessly to, 1 step ahead to every open man, whether it's for threes, whether it's for a roll. They're just so awesome, and you have players playing with so much energy, like Andrew Nembhard. Miles Turner has been awesome. Aaron Nesmith has been so great this series. This series has been about the role players for Indiana. Yeah, you have Pascal going off, and Tyrese Haliburton in this game was awesome as a playmaker. But it's really those other guys that are stepping up. And the Pacers, they have one of the best offenses for a reason. And it's not predicated off of straight isolation. It's actually a breath of fresh air because they swing the ball better than almost any team in the league.
And they're up 2-1 right now while shooting below 30% from three-point land in the series, which is the biggest thing to me. And as you highlight the role players, a lot of them are stepping up offensively. And I think a very big one is Miles Turner. When he was drafted in 2015, it was for his defensive potential. Tonight, they're taking this series with him dropping 29 points, going 4 of 10 from three-point land, which is very huge. That extra 3 does make. And Miles Turner's taking that step offensively that not many people expected, being able to put the ball on the floor, creating out a pick and roll, finishing plays in the short roll, and then also getting the glass a little bit more too. It finishes this game with 9 rebounds. And I think with the Tyrese Haliburton thread that you made on Twitter, I thought it was very good. The biggest difference is in a game where Tyrese Haliburton shoots 36%, he can control it entirely as a playmaker. Late in the shot clock, when the Indiana Pacers needed to get a shot, he was manipulating ball screens, getting his defender on his back hip, and then creating quick separation, getting it to a corner three. And if it wasn't a corner three, it was a hockey assist to an open shot. And even when the Pacers offense isn't dropping a high or a very efficient total, they're getting good looks. It's just that some guys like Aaron Nesmith go 1 of 7 some nights. And trading Buddy Hield at the deadline was mind-boggling to me because you weren't going to replace him. The Pacers don't quite have enough shooting right now to fully maximize Haliburton's playmaking. He finishes this game with 16 assists. And then take it a step further, even when he's not scoring a ton, you see him on a three-point shot from 23 feet, chasing his own miss like he's this scrappy, like it's Josh Hart, basically, and nearly getting an offensive rebound. Finishes this game with 5 of them to go along with 5 defensive rebounds. He had the one-handed putback dunk as well, just looking a little bit more explosive. And I think that's something you look for in a star player. When they aren't having their most efficient day, how are they playing through adversity? And quite frankly, are they allowing that to get to their head? With Haliburton, he's showing with his demeanor, a bad shooting night going 1 of 12, 8% from three-point land isn't going to take him out of the game.
You mentioned the biggest reason why I love Tyrese Haliburton. He can control the game without having gaudy scoring numbers. A game where he has 12 points and 12 assists, he controlled it entirely. Mm-hmm. A game where he shoots 1 for 12 from 3, he controlled it entirely. He's such an awesome player, and I think he's gotten slandered because of the high bar he set early in the season. Mm-hmm. But defenses have adjusted to how he was playing offensively. I think the hamstring still does have something to do with it. He's still trusting it more. But I know that we're going to get that player back eventually. I mean, maybe it might not be like 28 and 12, but maybe it might be 24 and 12, and that's totally fine.
28 and 12 is something we haven't seen, really. Tell me if I'm wrong, but we're comparing this guy to Steve Nash, like MVP Steve Nash, back-to-back, who generated one of the best offenses, one of the most revolutionary offenses. And that was never fully fair because it was based off of fall basketball when he was fully healthy. And a lot of teams in that part of the year are not trying very hard because they're just playing their way into shape. And the last 3 months, we've seen Haliburton look kind of bad. Granted, he still finished the year averaging 20 and 10 on efficient shooting because of the fact he set a bar which was drawing comparisons to Hall of Famers. Is he playing better this year than Stephen Curry? And oftentimes when a guy is first given the keys to a team, like Mikal Bridges' first year, his first 23 games in Brooklyn were amazing, but it's pretty hard to sustain 50, 40, and 90 averages when you're playing through an injury. You're not 100%. Your team just made a pretty seismic trade adding Pascal Siakam, who's now going to change your game. And again, you're trading your team's best shooter, one of your best friends, a guy who fits seamlessly in the backcourt with you. The Pacers have made a lot of different moves. And then you factor in, Joel, too, they don't run plays. This is Haliburton constructing the offense himself. He is, to me, kind of a modern version of Chris Paul. And that's going to come with its own fair share of criticism because of the expectations. But you're 100% right. I mean, he is one of the most unique point guards we've ever seen, I think.
But then it begs the question, like, what's more important, individual scoring output or team offensive output?
Team
the
offense.
Pacers, the Pacers before the All-Star break had an offensive rating of 122. Post All-Star break, an offensive rating of 121. It's not a drop off, even when Haliburton struggles. Mm-hmm. He has been struggling, but the offense has still been able to stay afloat. And I think it's a credit to him to be able to adjust his game and to keep the offense still at an efficient rate, one of the best in the league, even with him struggling. Mm-hmm. And that goes hand in hand with your point about controlling the game. He is a unique player, even with the comparisons to those Hall of Famers. You know, it's unfair. You know, I understand it, but I think he is that special. He is a true floor general point guard in an age of volume scorers at the position. He is a true facilitator. And if you're handpicking point guards and saying, how many point guards am I taking over Tyrese Haliburton to run my team, to run my offense? I'm not talking about players. I'm talking about to run my offense. Mm-hmm. I think it's Luka. I think it's SGA. It's Steph Curry. Jalen Brunson for what he's doing with the Knicks this year. You can't overlook him. John Morant, off of respect for John Morant, I think he gets underrated as a playmaker. After that, who else really comes to mind? I think with him and Trey Young, we saw the Hawks add DeJounte Murray, and they were never really able to fit like that.
Yeah.
So he wasn't able to adjust his game a little bit to make DeJounte look better. And it looks even worse because when Trey Young went out, DeJounte played great.
To me, more teams would rather Haliburton because he's a more scalable number 2. Whereas with Trey Young, maybe 8 or 10 teams rather have him as number 1. But Haliburton can allow Pascal to be the main creator, and he's going to thrive if he has to scale down. And that's probably the most underrated part of being a star player when you're not a top 10 player. Because with like you talked about before, this is a league of volume scores. It's also a league of star wings or 6'9", pretty strong, can score from all 3 levels. Haliburton doesn't have that same physicality. He doesn't have that same style. So at his position, how well can he scale down? And we're seeing it right now. Pascal's been the best. He's been the best player in this Pacers team. And he's proving why in Toronto he was limited. And I think it's a testament to Haliburton that he can allow Pascal to still be the best version of himself.
That's going to do it for our time recapping the game 3s that happened today. It's almost 2:30 in the morning. I want to thank you for your time, John. Next time, hopefully, we have the full crew here. John has not been able to come on the streams because I wasn't sure about his schedule because he is busy with school now. So the other day, the other day I called him and I asked him, hey, listen, if you want to be on the streams, you can. Just wasn't sure about your schedule. So I'm expecting more of John to be on here when the full guys are back. But if you guys have watched it all the way through on playback, we appreciate you guys. This will be up on YouTube after. If you're on YouTube watching this right now, make sure to drop the like button and subscribe to the channel because we're making a huge sacrifice staying up late to do these videos for you because we want to push out this content to you guys. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.